Hello, my name is Torrance Moore, and I am here to talk to you about how I came to faith in Jesus Christ. If you're like me, then one of the greatest stories of your life is how you came to know Jesus. Your story may not be one that would be suited for the big screen, but it is a story that is truly intimate and powerful in your own life. I believe that it's always good to take advantage of the opportunity to speak to someone about how your life was changed through Christ. Your story may be the one that motivates a person to engage in a relationship with our Savior that would ultimately change their life. What I love about these opportunities is that no story is the same. Every story you hear will be different and unique because that is the power of our God. So sit back, relax, and let me tell you how it all begins. I was blessed to be born in the right family. I say that because I understand that not everyone is granted the opportunity to be born into a family that held God at such a high standard. My family was engulfed in faith. It seemed as if Jesus was the only thing that we ever talked about. I couldn't really understand that at first because when you are young and you're getting to know the culture, you begin to notice staples in your life. Jesus was a part of everything at that time. It would be annoying. It seemed like Jesus was the reason for everything, and it really didn't make sense to me. Jesus was the reason for the sun, the moon, the rain. He would be the reason that the car started. It was something to behold. As I begin to grow and mature, I understand how much fellowship would mean to my family. We would spend a lot of time at church, and sometimes it would seem like we were at church every day. My family grew up in the same church, and it was a family reunion every time service was held. Not only did we fellowship together, but I began to learn the significance of worship in my family. They helped me understand that worship was something that happened every day. As I grew, I began to gain a knowledge of Christ and what he meant to my family. The one person who I would say was most influential in my life at that time was my grandfather. He was the leader of our family and the pastor of our church. If you were to ask me how I saw him in those days, I would say that he was a general in my life. At that time, he was my everything. I held him in such a high regard, and we had a great relationship. We would do everything together, and I learned so much from him. He would support me in just about anything that I would take on. But when he died, I was devastated. The death of the general in my life was so devastating that I realized that I just knew about God, but I really loved my grandfather. Can you imagine just having a knowledge of God, but your love and your heart was somewhere else? Well, that's how it was with my grandfather. I had allowed my grandfather to be the source of my joy, my happiness, my peace, my comfort in life. And when he was taken from us, I couldn't seem to get traction in my life again. From that point, things began to slope down into a spiral that was silent, but it was noticeable. I was upset with God and didn't understand why he would allow the greatest man I knew to leave my life. I left the church, but didn't leave the family. That was a difficult time because while the church was in transition to a new leader, I was stuck in my pain and misunderstanding. I began to get involved with the wrong crowds and do things that I was not and are not proud of today. When I look back on that time, even my anger was engulfed in selfishness because I didn't even consider how everyone else was grieving in my family. I realized that even during that time, God was still faithful. The death of my grandfather sent me into a ridiculous downward spiral in life, but I quickly realized something, that the death of the general required the entrance of the Savior. Grief had taken over my life. And because of that, I had allowed outside elements into my life so that I could cope with the pain. I would have smiles on my face around the family, but was deeply broken and hurt inside, and I began to use drugs and parties to fill the hole that was in my heart with reckless abandon, but I'd had no success. One night, while sitting in my car outside of a club, I began to weep and I began to pray and tell God my pain. I was under the influence of alcohol, but I was aware of the pain in my heart. And I began to pray and tell Jesus what I felt. Then came the entrance, and I felt a peace come over me at that moment and heard a voice say to me that I am with you. At that moment, things began to change because after I sat there and released everything in my car in a club parking lot in front of the crowd I was with, the pain began to leave. And I was relieved of the pain at that moment. And I realized that he was releasing me from the crowd. I had been using the wrong people in my life to give me comfort that only Jesus could give me. I left the pain and the people that night. And though I have talked to many of them since that night, I could not return to the same relationship I had with them. Jesus came in and captured my heart that night because he wanted me to know that he could and is and always has been my source. That night at the entrance of the Savior, I moved from just knowing Christ to loving and being in intimate relationship with him.